Before we start, a quick note. I've launched a new podcast called How Words Work. It looks at how the language used in lying and manipulation also shows up in everyday communication, often without people realising. And when you use that language, even honestly, it changes how people hear you. If you want to understand how to remove those signals from your own speech to sound clearer, more authoritative and more credible, that's what this new show is all about. You can find How Words Work with Jack Fox on all podcast platforms, like where you are now. Right, let's go to this episode. Tara Baker's boyfriend can remember what he was doing the day she was killed with perfect, to-the-minute clarity. But when it comes to the last words that she spoke to him, his memory vanishes. Do you buy this explanation?
It could depend on when the question's asked. It's not... If it's in a stressful moment, I'm going through things and trying to pull from times prior to this, when I'm not trying to, how should I say, lock in on certain things previous to this, it is difficult.
Welcome to Never a Truer Word, where we look at the words that people choose to use to see if they're telling the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. If you're new to this channel, what I do here is I only look at the words spoken by the person at the centre of the investigation and nothing else. And then I analyse those words to see if I can find the truth hidden inside them. It's a process that I use with investigators, with corporate clients and with the media to get a deep understanding of what is being said. So let's have a look at the case we're going to look at. And we're going to do this in two parts because there is a lot to look at. We're looking at the murder of Tara Baker. She was killed in January 2001. Now, this month, Edric Faust was found guilty of her murder, 25 years after the event. But unusually for Never a Truer Word, I'm not going to look at the words of the person that was found guilty because I'm going to look at someone different, a guy called Chris Melton. He was Tara's boyfriend at the time that she was killed. The defence put him in the witness box. They wanted to paint him as an alternate suspect, I believe, and they asked him some pretty pointed questions. And a lot of people got in touch with me saying, Jack, have a look at this guy. I think he's suspicious. I think the way he's talking, I think the way he's answering questions is suspicious. So I'm going to look at him. A reminder that my preferred way of working is not to know a lot about the case. So I haven't looked into the bigger picture here and why Edric Faust was found guilty by a jury here, because I don't want anything there to cloud my judgment or make me read things into words that aren't there. I just want to look at the words of Chris Melton on the stand. He testified for about 3 hours. We are going to look at this across a couple of episodes at bits where I think we can learn something from. So he's on the stand and I want you to listen for what he remembers versus what he doesn't, because he's very, very clear on some things and not so clear on other things. So let's listen to Chris on the stand. I will say there are some edits in the extracts. These are to edit out court process that was really not relevant to the words that he spoke, and just to make sure it's all a little bit shorter. Here he is talking about the day of Tara's murder.
Mr. Melton, so after you left Nash Plumbing, where did you go?
After I left Nash Plumbing, I went to the bank.
So just to ask you, so you can remember that you went to Nash Plumbing, and then after that, you can remember that you went to the bank from January 19, 2001.
That's correct.
Okay. But you cannot remember from January 18th whether or not Ms. Baker told you she was going to be alone?
At that time, it could depend on when the question's asked. It's not... If it's in a stressful moment, I'm going through things and trying to pull from times prior to this, when I'm not trying to, how should I say, lock in on certain things previous to this, it is difficult.
Okay. Would you agree?
Previous to her death. Go ahead.
I didn't hear you. Say that one more time.
I should say, it's like certain days, if somebody asks you what you have for breakfast, I couldn't tell you. But if I'm concentrating on after certain times, yes, I can, on certain things. But it's hard to describe.
The question is put to him, Mr. Melton. So after you left Nash Plumbing, and that's where he was working on the day that Tara was murdered. Mr. Melton, after you left Nash Plumbing, where did you go? And he says, after I left Nash Plumbing, I went to the bank. Very simple, very straightforward. You'll notice, and we hear a lot in these episodes of people qualifying things by going, I remember going to the bank, and telling you they remember going to the bank rather than just saying, I went to the bank. But this is all quite straightforward. After I left Nash Plumbing, I went to the bank. Do stick with these episodes because there is more to that statement than maybe meets the ear at the moment. And then first pointed question. So just to ask you, so you can remember you went to Nash Plumbing, and after that you can remember that you went to the bank from January 19, 2001. He says that's correct. Straightforward again. But you cannot remember from January 18th whether or not Miss Baker told you she was going to be alone. And he gives the most astonishing answer to that. He says, at the time it could depend on when the question is asked. So we have all the way through this, he talks about time. So let's just go through the whole answer and pull out when he mentions time. At the time, it could depend on when, another talk about time, when the question is asked. If it's in a stressful moment, so again, that's about time. I'm going through things and trying to pull from times prior. So more mentions of times. When I'm not trying to, how should I say it, lock in on certain things previous, another mention of time to this, it is difficult. So he mentions time a lot. And actually, what I think the impression he wants to give here is him saying that when he's under stress, he can't remember things. But that's not quite what his words say. His words say it depends on the time. Not the stress, but it depends on the time when I can remember things. At that time it could depend on, and it's only could depend, it's not, it does depend on when the question is asked. So it's not about how he's feeling, but it's about the time, it's when. Maybe it's which situation the question is asked. If it's in a stressful moment, and moments are quite small, I'm going through things and trying to pull from times prior to this, when I'm not trying to, how should I say, lock in on certain things previous to this, it is difficult. So trying to lock into things previous to this, we've got pull and lock there, two quite visceral words there about pulling memories. It's not, just remembering things, but it's pulling memories and locking in on things as well. Very, very active words on that. And he talks about this, trying to pull from times prior to this and previous to this. It's almost like he's saying, I can remember the day of the murder really clearly, but not anything that happened before it, which would be quite convenient in some ways. But you notice today where he's got the alibis about going to the bank and so on, crystal clear and, straightforward answers. But this is a word salad, but it's focused on the time that he's asked, not how he's feeling when he's asked, but the time that he's asked. And he talks about this and he clarifies later, this is the death, the murder of Tara, but he just downplays it, really softens it down to just a this, which is quite remote, distant. It is something that's present, a this, but it's not prior to Tara's murder or anything like that. The defence counsel goes on to say, would you agree? And he's going to ask another question. And he feels that he hasn't given a big enough explanation. He does, Chris. He says, previous to to her death, and he is clarifying that he has hard time remembering anything previous to her death. And he uses the word death, which is less soft than this, not as soft as softer than murder though, which is what happened to Tara. It was a vicious murder, and he doesn't say prior to her murder, so he's downplaying a little bit what happens there, or what he's talking about there. It's a very, very, very strange answer. We've got that focus on time. Now, I've watched all his testimony. He has no problems talking about things prior to the death. It just seems to be that one day prior to the death, or maybe a kind of a period of a few weeks prior to the death where his memory is all hazy about what happened. But in terms of like when he talks about meeting Tara, how they got on, who Tara was, what she was like as a person, he has no problems. The stress, nothing there affects him whatsoever. His answer doesn't match the question. You cannot remember from January the 18th whether or not Miss Baker told you she was going to be alone. He doesn't say, I can't remember. He doesn't say, I can remember. He doesn't. His answer just does not match the question that is asked of him. And how does he know he remembers sometimes? Like, how does he know sometimes he can remember things? And also, why doesn't he just write it down at some point, or, just like fix on, these are the things that I can remember? Very, very strange answer. He's asked to repeat that by counsel, and he says, how should I say? It's like certain days, if somebody asked you what you had for breakfast, I couldn't tell you. But if I'm concentrating on after certain times, yes, I can. On certain things, it's hard to describe. Yes, it is hard to describe, because those words are very, very strange again. It's that thing of, can you remember what you got for your 5th birthday? And you'll say, I can't remember what I had for breakfast this morning. That's what he's trying to say, but there's no fluidity to it there at all. He just doesn't seem to be able to get an authentic, easy version out of saying, I can't remember what Tara said to me the day before. I'm not saying she didn't say it. I'm not saying she did say it. I'm saying I can't remember what she said the day before. It's very, very strange. And we have after certain times, so another mention of time. And let me just go on to when he's talking about breakfast, he says, if you asked me what I had for breakfast, I couldn't tell you. Now, I wouldn't tell you is I'm not sharing. I know, but I'm not telling you. I wouldn't tell you, which is the first thing he says. And then he corrects it to couldn't tell you, which is the sort of cliche of I couldn't tell you what I had for breakfast this morning. If I said I wouldn't tell you what I had for breakfast this morning, you would have a very different meaning from me whatsoever. So in that very first part here, he's saying the answer depends on the time. When he's asked the question, not about how his memory is or so on, but about the time and his clarity around the day of the murder, which is an alibi, which might be a true alibi, by the way. I get no sign he was lying about it there. But his clarity around the day of the murder is at odds with his confusion about the day before. Let's move on and listen to some more of his testimony. And this is about when did he last see Tara?
Did you have sex with Miss Baker the day of her death?
No, sir.
The last time you saw Miss Baker, was it 6 days before, 10 days before?
From the beginning, I've said I saw her the weekend prior.
From the beginning, you've said that?
Yes, sir.
That you've seen her the weekend, and that has always been what you said?
There was a time that I was confused, and it was 20 plus years later. And then I made a statement that I felt like maybe it was 10 days prior, and I was confused at that point because I have always said from even meeting with the detectives from the beginning that we were together that weekend. And then time had gone by, and I had even spoke out publicly for the first time.
Mr. Melton, to my question, is that a yes or a no?
You may continue if you choose to do so.
Well, time had gone by, and then I had spoken publicly. At this point, I have stated over and over again that we were together the weekend before. And then there was a point in time that Tara's mother had stated that she was at her house.
I'm going to object to hearsay.
So I'm watching this now and I'm going, I can see why people are suspicious in the way he answers. It's very, very unusual. The question goes to him, did you have sex with Miss Baker the day of her death? And he says, no, sir. I believe that's straightforward and simple. We've seen him do a lot of explaining, a lot of kind of storytelling. He uses a lot of deceptive language in this segment here, but this, no, sir, is really straightforward. The last time you saw Miss Baker, was it 6 days or 10 days before? And he says, from the beginning, I've said I saw her the weekend prior. So what have we got here? Well, this is where it gets interesting. He starts his answer not saying the last time I saw Miss Baker was 6 days before or 10 days before or neither, it was 7 days before or whatever. He says, from the beginning, I've said I saw her the weekend prior, which is this level of consistency that he wants to convey. The most important thing for him to do is not answer the question and say when was the last time he saw Tina Baker. The most important thing for him to do is say, I've been consistent, I've told the same story all the time, because it's the first thing he says with this answer. And we see that so often with deceptive people. It doesn't need to be said. He's not been asked, have you changed your story at this point or anything like that. If he said, I saw her the weekend prior, it would be a satisfactory answer to the question. But he feels the need, first of all, to say from the beginning. And we see this in deceptive people a lot, where they feel they have to be consistent in their deception because, if I contradict myself, I'm in trouble. So it's really high priority to be consistent when I'm deceiving. And not only am I going to be consistent, I'm going to point out how consistent I am, because that's going to make me sound more believable. But to people like me, makes me go, why are you pointing out your consistency? So from the beginning, I've said, I saw her the weekend prior. Now, we've got the answer to the question there, the weekend prior. You maybe have to do some maths because he's been asked, is it 6 or 10 days before? And he says the weekend prior. But he has given a satisfactory answer, but only after he gives a big red flag answer. And it's a red flag for the counsel as well, for the attorney as well, because he says, from the beginning, you've said that? Yes, sir, he says. Now, that's a very straightforward answer. That you've seen her the weekend, that's always been what you said. It's a yes, no question. And he doesn't give a yes, no answer. Instead, he goes back to talking about time. There was a time that I was confused, and it was 20 plus years later. And then I made a statement that I felt maybe it was 10 days prior. And I was confused at that point because I have always said, from even meeting the detectives from the beginning, that we were together that weekend. And then time had gone by, a lapse of time again, and I even spoke out publicly for the first time. So he's taken a real detour here with the answer, because if you remember the question, it was, have you always said this? And he says, in a roundabout way, I didn't always say it, but here's some explanations as to why it was. I'm going to talk about the passage of time again because this is very important to me. Fair enough, it's 25 years after the event. And then I'm going to talk about speaking publicly, which is like he's on the highway and boom, he's taken the off-ramp to talk about something else. What he wants to leave the answer with is the fact that I was talking publicly. Look at me. Talking publicly, nothing to be frightened of. So let's break that answer down a bit more. There was a time I was confused. So there was a time I was confused. He's not confused anymore. And it was 20 plus years later. So this passage of time is very important to him. And then I made a statement that I felt like maybe it was 10 days prior. Low confidence there in what he said. Felt is a feeling, it's not a fact. And maybe could be, could not be. Felt like maybe it was 10 days prior. And I was confused at that point because and I have always said, so we've got this consistency marker again. I have always said this from even meeting with the detectives from the beginning that we were together that weekend. Even meeting with the detectives from the beginning. Why is that even there? It suggests to me that, I even told the truth at the beginning. Which is like not something someone who's always truthful would say, is it? I even told the truth from the beginning. I even mentioned this from the beginning. Not just I mentioned this from the beginning. Suggests to me that the thought of not being honest or changing his story has always been in his head. And then time had gone by, and I even spoke out publicly for the first time. So a huge big detour there. Attorney notices here that we've gone far off the question. To my question, is that a yes or no? There's an objection. There's lots of chat. The judge says you may continue if you choose to do so. And then the answer comes from Chris, and it starts with, well, which is you're going to get an explanation, not an answer. It was a kind of yes-no question, wasn't it? Well, time had gone by. Time elapsed again. And then I'd spoken publicly at this point. Again, this feels to me very much like that I've been consistent. Also, I've spoken publicly. I have stated over and over again, so here we go again with this repetition. I've been so consistent that we were together the weekend before. And then there was a point in time that Tara's mother had stated that she was at her house. Now that last line, I'm reassured by that. I'm going to talk to you about that in a minute. We have a point in time again. So all these transitional points in time. But he says, I have stated over and over again that we were together the weekend before. But what we don't get in any of this is just a really solid, We were together the week before. He talks about what he said. He stated this many times, but he doesn't actually say what he did and what he and Tara did, which is spend the weekend together. And then we get the objection to hearsay. Now here, there is that big focus on time. It continues. But he did bring up both sides to the story, which was Tara's mother saying that Tara was not with him that weekend. So he's open to mentioning this, which is why this is such a... Is it confusing? Is it baffling? I don't know. But it is such an intriguing set of words to look at. But he's very evasive on his changing story. Once more, we have this narrative that twists and turns from him. And he's very, very evasive on it. His language doesn't flow. It's not easy to follow. And again, it's all about the passing of time. Listen, there's more. Because on the day of Tara's murder, Chris had injuries on his hands, and he's going to be talking about them, and we'll catch up with that shortly. Let's take a quick pause. If you're finding this useful, make sure you're following the podcast so new episodes land automatically for you. Everything here is about developing a skill, and the more you listen, the sharper it gets over time. And if you're listening on Spotify, you can also subscribe to get exclusive episodes, early access, and video versions where you can actually see the words we're analysing on the screen. That extra layer makes a real difference if you want to go deeper. Let's go back to the trial now. Let's go back to Chris on the stand, and he's talking about those injuries to his hand.
You testified on direct examination that you became so upset that you punched the wall in your apartment. Is that correct?
When I unleashed the emotions, yes.
Okay. And when you unleashed the emotions, you became extremely angry. Is that correct?
I was upset. Yes, I was upset at the situation.
And the way you chose to release your emotions through violence. Would you agree?
Towards that wall.
But you told the jury that the injuries to your hands came from punching the wall. Is that right?
My injuries came from punching the wall.
Okay, and we've already agreed. Well, you've testified that the wall was sheetrock. Is that correct?
That's correct.
You recognize Defense Exhibit 37 through Defense Exhibit 40 as the wall that you punched. Is that correct?
I would say yes.
Okay. Is that a fair and accurate depiction of how that wall looked after you punched it?
I'd say from what I could recollect.
Sure. Has that photograph been altered in any way?
I'm not sure. I wouldn't.
But you have no reason to believe that photograph has been altered in any way. Is that correct?
I have no reason to believe.
Okay. All right. Can you see your hands on the screen, Mr. Melton?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And you would agree, for the purposes of the record, I am making a fist. Mr. Melton, you would agree that a fist looks like this. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Can you make a fist and show the jury what your fist looks like? Okay. Excellent. I want to talk about this injury here on the side of your thumb. Can you explain how you got that injury from punching drywall?
My hands are from work.
Are they?
So, I mean, no, I'm just saying my hands from work are naturally have nicks and such on them. But that very well could have occurred. I mean, from punching through a wall, there's also things inside the wall. There's siding on the wall that has, once you go through, there's nails that may have been there. But at that point, I mean, I have little nicks and cuts just from my profession.
If you're watching the video there, that blurring was done in court, I guess, to hide any pictures being shown. And he gets very defensive here, does Chris. And maybe that's natural. Maybe he knows what they're getting at here, which is trying to say, you had motive. There's evidence around that suggests you could have been the person that attacked Tara, murdered Tara. And he gets very defensive. But let's break down the words. You testified on direct examination that you became so upset that you punched the wall in your apartment. Is that correct? And he says, when the emotions got... When I unleashed the emotions, yes. So it's a yes-no question. Is that correct? And he does give a yes in his answer. He was going to say when the emotions got and thought better of whatever it was he was going to say. We can't assume what it is, but I could say, what was he going to say when the emotions got too much for me? And he realizes, look, I don't want to paint myself here as someone who lashes out when emotions get too much for me, so I'm going to say them a little bit, I'm going to say it a little bit better, which is when I unleashed the emotions, yes. Okay, and when you unleashed the emotions, you became extremely angry. Is that correct? It's a yes-no question, and he doesn't say yes or no. He says, I was upset. Yes, I was upset at this situation. So I was upset. It's not a yes, it's not a no, it's an I was upset, which is not quite the anger that was put to him. It's just upset. He doesn't say why he was upset either. He doesn't say why. Well, he does. He says, I was upset at the situation. Not the fact that my girlfriend had been murdered. Not the fact that someone had murdered my girlfriend. It was just all boiled down to this very soft, considering what happened, the situation. And the way you chose to release your emotions was through violence. Would you agree? Now we're getting towards some pointed questions. It's really obvious where the defence are going with this. And so it is a yes-no question, and he doesn't say yes or no. He says towards the wall. Now, is that understandable to you in this situation? He's being got at here. This is real pointed questioning, saying, are you the person that murdered your girlfriend? So he wants to not get cornered into saying, when I've got emotions, I release them through violence. He wants to point out it was towards the wall. Could be something that's really understandable, but also it's a bit of a red flag that he doesn't just answer the question, that he channels it somewhere else. But you told the jury that the injuries to your hand came from punching the wall. Is that right? And he says, my injuries came from punching the wall. So he doesn't answer here yes or no again, because what's the harm in saying yes or no? You told the jury the injuries to your hand came from punching the wall. Is that right? Yes, it's right. He doesn't actually deal with what he's told the jury. He talks about his injuries, which is not the same thing as what he was asked. My injuries came from punching the wall. Bit of tension there with the stuttering, bit of stress going on with the stuttering as well. However, I think most of us would feel stressed in this situation. Okay, and we've already agreed, well, you've testified that the wall was sheetrock. Is that correct? That's correct, he says. So, he can answer a yes-no question directly around this. You recognise Defence Exhibit 37 through Defence Exhibit 40 as the wall you punched. Is that correct? He says, I would say yes. Which is, I don't know, if you're showing a picture of a wall from 25 years ago, would you recognise it? I mean, I would say yes. Possibly, I'm all right with that. By the way, he did say in one of the earlier extracts that we listened to, he said, how would I say, before he went on to explain why he can't remember things, that seemed to me like he was letting us in on his thinking process, which is something that liars tend not to do. Just pointing that out. Back to this. Is it fair and accurate depiction of how the wall looked after you punched it? I'd say from what I can from what I can recollect. So no problems really remembering the wall then. Yeah, I'd say yes is really what he's saying. So his memory is absolutely fine about this. Has the photograph been altered in any way? He says, I'm not sure. I wouldn't. I'm fine with that answer. You given a photograph of a wall from 25 years ago, would you know if it had been altered in any way? He gives a very, I think, it sounds like a sort of weaselly sort of answer that could go both ways, but really, I'm all right with that. But you have no reason to believe the photograph has been altered in any way. Is that correct? He says, I have no reason to believe. And then he's showing a picture of his hands at the time. Can you see your hands on the screen, Mr. Melton? Yes, sir. And would you agree, for the purposes of the record, I'm making a fist. Mr. Melton, would you agree a fist looks like this? Is that correct? Yes, sir. Okay, can you make a fist and show the jury what your fist looks like? Okay, excellent. I want to talk to you about this injury here on the side of your thumb. Can you explain how you got that injury from punching a drywall? And he says, my hands are from work. So he's struggling with his words again. We all know what he means to say. My hands got that way through the work I do. He was a plumber, as we'll come on to here. But again, he's struggling with his words to get just fluid words out. My hands are from work. Are they? I mean, no. I'm just saying my hands from work are naturally have nicks and such on them. So now He's testified previously that the injuries on his hands were from punching a wall. He's asked about something else, and all of a sudden, it's not from punching a wall. He brings in something else. He's asked, are they, which is your hands are from work? And he says, I mean, no. So are they from work or not? Because he's just said no. And then I'm just saying, we've got that word just there, which can indicate deception is happening. That word just is used to, and in this case, I think, minimize down. I'm not doing anything big here. I'm not doing, I'm not changing my testimony. I'm not telling a different story. I'm just saying, and I'm only just doing this as a small thing. Don't think it's a big thing. I'm just saying my hands from work are naturally have nicks and such on them. But you'll notice this is in the present tense. My hands from work are naturally have nicks and such on them. Not talking about this photograph, not saying that my hands had nicks from work and on them, or nicks and such on them. And it's general as well. He's not talking about the mark and the thumb that he's been asked about and saying that's a nick from work or that was a nick from work in the past tense. He's just saying in general my hands have nicks and such on them. But that very well could have occurred. So we just have could have occurred, not that's what happened. So there's low confidence in what he's saying here. I mean, from punching through a wall, not the wall, just punching through a wall, any wall at all. So he's gone very general here. There's also things inside the wall. There's siding on the wall that has, once you go through, there's nails that may have been there. Now, this is really, really worrying for me. He's not talking about the wall that he punched 25 years ago. He's talking about a wall in general. There's also things inside the wall, present tense. There's siding on the wall, present tense. Once you go through, so not once I punched through it that day, there's nails, present tense, there's nails that may have been there. So he's not even attributing it to the nails that were there. They just may have been there. The have been there is in past tense, but that's only after a may. So this is not reassuring me at all. But at that point, I mean, I have little nicks and cuts just from my profession. So again, this is in present tense. But at that point, I had little nicks and cuts just from my profession. So in this first part of him talking about those injuries in his hand, it's not about he does not talk about the specific incident of hitting that wall, which is how he said he got these marks and these injuries to his hands the day his girlfriend was murdered. He talks much more generally, and he talks in the present tense as well. Let's get some more about him talking about hitting the wall that day.
But Mr. Milton, isn't it fair to say as a plumber you wear gloves?
No, sir.
You never wear gloves?
I wear gloves, but not 100% of the time. No, sir.
Well, I showed you Defense Exhibit 37 through Defense Exhibit 40. There's a pair of gloves hanging on your wall, Mr. Milton.
Hanging on my wall.
But you don't use them.
When you're working with your hands, you work quickly also. And you don't have time to always have gloves on. And at that point in time, I'm not working with raw sewage or anything. This is new materials. So with that being said, you not worried about bacteria or anything infecting your hands. You just work through it. So
today, on February 9th, 2026, you remember exactly how you were working on January 19, 2001.
It's easily to assess because I worked it for so long.
Sure, but you don't remember whether or not Ms. Baker told you she was going to be home alone the day before her death.
In moments under stress, I can't recall everything.
So let me ask you about this injury here. So did this come from the wall or did that come from work?
Is that an injury?
Right here.
I don't know if I...
Or how about this injury here, Mr. Melton? How would you get this injury on the top of your hand going in this direction from punching sheetrock?
That even appears... Oh yes, even when you punch through walls, you got to pull your hand back. And I'm punching into a wall, pulling my hand back, punching through a wall. And even at work, I have nicks, cuts, and even burns from soldering pipes and hot materials. I can't tell if that's an injury from hitting something or an injury from work, and it may look like that. Even looks like it could be even a slight solder. It's hard to say. I mean, it's hard for me to assess that.
But this is the first time in 25 years that you've ever made the statement that these injuries were from work. Would you agree?
I've never been asked the question as far as if they're from.
The worry continues for me. Mr. Melton, is it fair to say as a plumber you wear gloves, is the first question that was asked there. No, sir. You never wear gloves? I wear gloves, but not 100% of the time. No, sir. Well, I showed you Defence Exhibit 37 through Defence Exhibit 40. There's a pair of gloves hanging on your wall, Mr. Melton. He says, hanging on my wall, but you don't use them. And he says, when you're working with your hands, you work quickly also, and you don't have time to always have gloves on. And this was at that point in time. I'm not working with raw sewage or anything, so he is asked, you don't use gloves all the time, and he talks about what you would do, not what he would do. When you're working with your hands, you work quickly also, and you don't have time to always have gloves on. And at that point in time, I'm not working with raw sewage or anything. So we've got some present tense in there as well. So as well as this generalness of, I wear gloves sometimes, I don't wear gloves sometimes, he's just telling us about you, not himself. I'm not, at that point in time, I'm not working with raw sewage or anything. Present tense, not I didn't work with raw sewage or anything. So an answer that is very general about gloves, and also in the present tense about what he does now. This is new materials. So with that being said, you're not worried about bacteria or anything infecting your hands. You just work and work through it. So he's talking about you, not himself. He's not talking about himself in gloves. For some reason, he's talking about people in general. The council says to him, so today, on February 9, 2026, you remember exactly how you were working on January 19th, 2001. He says, it's easily to assess because I worked it for so long. Sure, but you don't remember whether or not Miss Baker told you she was going to be home alone the day before her death. And I spoke about this, what he remembers with crystal clarity, like how he got these nicks in his hand, apparently, and things that he can't remember. And the answer comes back, in moments under stress, I can't recall everything. So he doesn't answer the question again. He doesn't say, I can't remember that. He talks in general, again, in moments under stress. And again, we've got moments. It's this passage of time and this concept of time. I wonder if he thinks he's not the person he was then. Things have changed and I'm a different person. And that's why he keeps talking about this passage of time. But in moments under stress, I can't recall everything. Everything is big in general. I can't recall everything. This is a very specific thing that's been put to him about what Miss Baker said Tina Baker said the day before she was murdered. But he's widened it out again. He's gone really, really general. He's not taken on the specifics. And it's, I can't recall everything. This is kind of like just saying, I can't recall these things. Not I don't know them. It's just, I can't recall them. Such a general answer. So let me ask you about this injury here. So did this come from the wall or did that come from work? He says, is that an injury? Right here, he said, I don't know if I'd... So he picks on another one. How about this injury here, Mr. Melton? How would you get this injury on the top of your hand going in this direction from punching sheetrock? And he says, that even appears... Oh yes, so when you punch, even when you punch through walls, you've got to pull your hand back. I'm punching into a wall, pulling my hand back, punching through a wall. I think you can see it and hear it there. He talks about you again. He doesn't say, I got that because when I punched the wall, I have to pull my hand back out of the wall, and that's how I got those injuries to my hand. Instead, he talks about you again. When you punch, even when you punch through walls, so again, general walls, not talking about this specific wall that he was hitting, you've got to pull your hand back. I'm punching into a wall. I'm punching into a wall is present tense. He's talking about something in the past. I punched into a wall, I pulled my hand back, I punched through a wall. And it's again, it's a wall. just a wall, not the wall. I'm punching into a wall, pulling my hand back. So once again, we have the present tense, punching through a wall, present tense, and just this general wall. And even at work, I have nicks, cuts, and even burns from soldering pipes and hot materials. So I have, once more, he's talking about now. He's saying now I've got nicks and cuts and even burns from soldering pipes and hot materials, not what happened at the time. So I can't tell if that's an injury from hitting something or an injury from work. And it may look like, and he moves on to something else, but an injury from hitting something, not a wall. And you know what the allegation is here, that did he get those marks on his hand from hitting someone, not something? But he doesn't talk about the wall there. It's a bit of a, could be potential slip there for me. I didn't get that injury from hitting something, not from hitting the wall, or an injury from work. That even looks like it could be a slight solder. He says solder, I say solder. What do you say? Let me know in the comments. Anyway, he said solder. It's hard to say. I mean, it's hard for me to assess that. He's changed his story again, according to the defence person. This is the first time in 25 years that you've ever made the statement that these injuries from work. Would you agree? Yes, no question. And he says, I've never been asked the question as far as if they're from... And it dribbles out. But surely he was asked the question, how did you get those injuries on your hand? And he said, from punching a wall. But now he's saying, I was never asked if they were from work. Funnily enough, you weren't asked there if the injuries were from work. You volunteered that those nicks and things were from work when that came up. So once more, talking about the marks on his hand, which are hella suspicious, his answers are also hella suspicious. They are very general, and he's in very, very present tense about hitting the wall. So that is part one of that look into Chris Melton's testimony in the Tara Baker murder trial. I don't know. I haven't heard anything else. I don't know why Enric Foss was found guilty. But those words there raised so many questions from me. No conclusions yet from me, because we are going to do part two. And when we do part two, the next time, we're going to hear him talking about allegations of inappropriate behaviour with women. And not just inappropriate behaviour with women, but shortly after Tara was murdered, like days after Tara was murdered. How does he talk about that? We have changing timelines again from the guy that we're going to look at. And his timelines change, especially when he's confronted with evidence.
She told you the DNA doesn't last that long in her mouth. Is that right?
Correct.
She told you all of this information before you said that, hey, I remember now, I saw Miss Baker the weekend before she passed away. Would you agree with that?
Correct, I would say.
What do you think about the words that Chris Melton used? Do let me know in the comments. Maybe we'll include some of them in the next episode as well, when we do look at the second part of his testimony and try and wrap up. Is he suspicious because he's really, really tense and nervous and edgy because he knows what's going on here? Or is he suspicious because he's hiding something? NeverAtruerWord.com is the website. There you will find a whole load more episodes looking into how to dissect someone's words. Also, if you want to sign up for the newsletter, then you get a monthly bombardment of, that doesn't sell it very well, does it? A monthly bombardment of hints and tips on how to look for the truth and deception in people's words. You'll find all of that at NeverAtruerWord.com. We'll see you soon for something new from Never a Truer Word. And remember, the truth is always in the words.